Sales doesn't need to be hard or overcomplicated. That's not my way of saying that sales is easy. Rather, I'm saying that you can have a successful career in sales if you develop a process and execute on it consistently. This channel is dedicated to what a sales process framework could look like and showcasing the different best and worst practices around the different steps of a sales process. The intention is to publish short, weekly videos that are easily digestible with clear action items that you can begin doing today. Welcome to Sunday Sales Staples. Today's topic revolves around one of the basic things you need to know when you're out there selling: elevator pitches. I'm going to start with a story of my own failure and success around elevator pitches. We'll then cover the best practices around elevator pitches, and then we'll end with some worst practices. And before we do that, let's jump into the definition of an elevator pitch. I define elevator pitches as short, memorable descriptions of why your company exists, how your company operates, and what your company does. The goal is to capture the attention of your prospects in order to continue the conversation with them or earn a second conversation somewhere in the future. People may refer to elevator pitches as elevator speeches, elevator intros, or 30-second speeches, but they're all the same thing. This video will give a high-level overview into the best and worst practices of elevator pitches. However, it will not cover the structure of elevator pitches. I will be covering the structure in more detail in a later video, so stay tuned. With that said, let's jump into my case study. In my first sales role, I was in the field selling beverages for a well-known brand, and I had a designated territory in Southern California. There wasn't necessarily a need for an elevator pitch because everyone had heard of the beverage and there was a lot of demand for the product. Honestly, it made my life pretty easy. When I made the transition to startup software sales, it was a completely different story. In my second sales role, I was assigned the entire West Coast region, and I was responsible for going door to door to introduce my company's software to store owners. These owners had never heard of my company or solution, and it was frustrating. I was so accustomed to booking new business on my brand alone that I was forced to learn a new skill of putting together an elevator pitch. Initially, I thought I could put together an elevator pitch on my own, so I crafted a one-page speech and started using it on my first day in the field. The speech covered the product, its tech specs, and value propositions, and it was nearly 4 minutes long. After the first day of using this speech, I booked 0-second conversations, and business owners were not interested in learning more about the solution. I thought this was just a fluke day, and I decided to use the speech again for a second day. To no surprise, I had the same results, and I was dispirited. A number of questions popped into my head. Did people not like me? Did they not like my solution? What was or wasn't I saying that would make them continue the conversation? The next day, I woke up early and called my counterpart on the East Coast. I explained my situation and asked for some help. My coworker was able to quickly diagnose the problem, which was my elevator speech was lengthy, had no structure, and wasn't compelling enough for a business owner to be interested. They emailed me a copy of their elevator pitch, and we practiced for a few minutes on the phone before I went out into the field for the day. The results for my third day were completely different. Out of the 20 stores that I visited, 8 of them either continued the conversation with me while I was on site, or they scheduled follow-up discussions for the next week. By going in with a well-crafted elevator pitch, I started the customer journey off on the right foot. Now, I should mention that not all 8 of these store owners ended up purchasing the product. However, going from 0 interested decision makers in 2 days to 8 in 1 day set the stage for successful expansion in my territory for months to come. Now, this is just one example of an elevator pitch success story, and I would encourage you to reach out to your veteran counterparts to see what they do differently. Do they emphasize specific value propositions during their elevator pitch? Do they have different elevator pitches for different decision makers? And how long are their elevator pitches? Learning from the success of others will only set you up for your own success in the future. And to start this learning journey, let's jump into my best practices. Here are some of the tactics that I have seen work for myself and others throughout the years when it comes to elevator pitches. The first is to keep things short and sweet. Elevator pitches should be 30 to 45 seconds long, no more and no less. You only have a few moments to capture the attention of your prospect, and you need to make it count. Next, is to not sell. An elevator pitch is your chance to introduce your product to the prospect, not to close them. I've never heard of someone closing new business on an elevator pitch alone, and you will wait to close a new prospect during further conversations. Next is the structure. When it comes to structuring an elevator pitch, you should stick with the why, how, what model. This means starting your pitch off with why your company exists, then moving into a one-sentence overview of how your solution works, and finishing it off with the goal of your company. Let's say you work at Gong, the conversation intelligence tool. An example of the why, how, what structure could be something like this. Organizations are losing valuable insights into their revenue team's conversation metrics by not recording their phone calls and virtual meetings. Gong allows individual contributors to record interactions with prospects and places these meetings into a central repository. We aim to enable leaders, managers, and individual contributors with the information they need to be more effective on the phones and drive new business. As you can see in this example, the three-sentence why, how, what structure is a short, succinct way to give your prospect an overview as to why they should care. Next is to create custom elevator pitches depending on your buyer persona. If you're reaching out to someone in finance, make sure to talk about the value props around ROI or budget. If you're reaching out to someone in operations, make sure to talk about the value props around workflows and operational efficiency. You shouldn't have a generic elevator pitch for every buyer persona at the company because it won't resonate with them enough to spark their attention. And lastly, you need to practice your elevator pitch. If you're in a sales profession and you're expected to make 100 or more calls per day, you can't start the first call off cold. Practice while you're getting ready for work. Practice while you're commuting to the office, that is, if you're still working in person. Practice by pulling a colleague aside for a few minutes and ask them to share their elevator pitch as well. The more you practice your elevator pitch, the more confident you will sound, and you will ultimately generate more pipeline. And now that we've covered best practices, let's flip it over to the worst practices. As for the worst practices, there's really only two that I would warn you about: monologues and monotone. Monologues. Please remember that an elevator pitch needs to be short and succinct. This is not an opportunity to create a 5-minute monologue of your product, service, or solution. Your prospects will lose interest and you're starting off on the wrong foot. And next is being monotone. This means talking at the same pace, the same volume, and same energy throughout the entire 30 seconds. While you're crafting and practicing your elevator pitch, be sure to emphasize specific words, insert a quick pause to convey importance of the previous detail, and vary your energy so you keep your prospect engaged. If you sound bored and robotic, then you're getting off on the wrong foot and it's not going to lead anywhere. That wraps up this week's quick overview of elevator pitches, and I appreciate you checking out the video. I said it earlier in the video, but I wanted to mention it again. This lesson was designed to be a high-level overview of elevator pitches, and I will go into the structure of elevator pitches in more detail in a separate video, so stay tuned. If you want to dig deeper into elevator pitches, I highly recommend checking out some articles that you can easily find on Google. Some people will have similar ideas to mine, and others will differ, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to craft your own elevator pitch strategy, and I do hope there were some key takeaways that you can begin using today. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, sales does not need to be hard or overcomplicated. While sales is becoming vastly more complex with metrics and data, your process does not need to be so convoluted that it isn't easily replicated. Keep coming back to the channel to learn more about how to simplify your process and win new business. And feel free to reach out to me via email at sundaysalesstaples@gmail.com or reach out on Instagram at sundaysalesstaples. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next week.